All right, hey guys, welcome to the Daily Word Bible Study, a plain and simple book by book, chapter by chapter, and verse by verse study through the entire Bible. And we are in Luke chapter 23, and we're going to talk about today there were two thieves that were crucified with Jesus and with two different outcomes. And I don't know if sometimes we do, when we look at this story, I don't, that's something we certainly should kind of recognize that is astounding, that the outcomes of the two different thieves, um, and how even at the moment of death, we could have some very strange ideals about death. I remember being a young person, and this is just stupid. I was just young and stupid. But I always thought that when I was first a Christian, that the elderly people would be the easiest to preach to because they're old and they're near death. They're near death, and so and I remember there was one time I was witnessing to a crowd of elderly people, and they ganged up on me. Shut up talking to me, you young whippersnapper. So that bubble was burst. It is interesting, and we all are going to, at some point, we are all going to face death, and there are millions of ways, right, that humans face death. Of course, we all know about the recent one where that person didn't see death coming. In a blink of an eye, he was gone. And then others have a more slow approach to death. So it's just interesting. It's just interesting. Let's get into it. Luke chapter 23. Now, here we go. So I started this last time, but I'm going to obviously go back. I started verse 26, so we kind of get caught up, brought up to speed. No, you know what? I don't need to. Well, I would. Verse 26 says, "As they led him away, they seized Simon, a Cyrene, who was coming in from the country, and laid the cross on him to carry behind Jesus." Now, it probably was the upper beam of the cross beam. Okay, and the large crowd followed him, including women who were mourning and lamenting him. And part of this crowd was his mother, Mary Magdalene, the other Mary. But turning to them, Jesus said, "Daughters of Jerusalem, do not weep for me, but weep for yourselves and your children. Look, the days are coming when they will say, the women without children, the wombs that never bear, and the breasts that never nurse are fortunate. Then they will begin to say to the mountains, fall on us, and to the hills, cover us. For if they do these things when the wood is green, what will happen when it is dry?" Verse 32 says, "Two other criminals were also led to be executed with him. And when they arrived at the place called the Skull, they crucified him there along with the criminals, one on the right and the other on the left. And then Jesus said, Father, forgive them because they do not know what they are doing." Now there are brackets here because other gospels kind of put this phrase in a different category. That's why I think it's Matthew. Um, I won't go to it, but I think Matthew puts it in a different time. Okay. Anyway, and then they divided his clothes and cast lot. Now Matthew gives us a more detail of this incident here because this was a prophetic fulfillment. That in the book of Psalms it says that they cast lots. They divided lots for his clothes. They divided his clothes and cast lots for them. Now, there was another case where the Pharisees were mocking him, and then later Jesus said, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they are doing. And he says, and the people stood watching, and even the leaders kept scoffing. He saves others. Let him save himself if this is God's Messiah, the chosen one. Now, as I told you before, the Pharisees, they knew this. What is the vileness of the sin is that they are just rejecting Jesus. If you go back to Genesis, to the fall of man, and one of the things that you constantly see with the fall of man, since the fall of man, is the ever presence of sin as it goes from bad to worse. So this has always happened. We like to live in a fantasy. Keep doing this here. We like to live in a fantasy that forgot the tag. Okay, but we live in a fantasy that how life should be, and it's a facade. It is. It's a facade. You know, you. Here's the interesting thing, and I'm going to dabble just a moment because the recent execution, as we saw this, the assassination of this one young man, and you saw the reaction of people, and boy, did you see the reaction of people to their shame. And then you see the picture of the shooter, and he has a picture perfect family, a picture perfect family. And what people didn't realize was this picture perfect family was a murderer, right? And a murderer that they would never have thought that he would murder. And that's the issue. That is the interesting thing right here. When you look at the picture, he had a picture perfect life. You know, what's that? That Norman Rockwell picture of the life. You know, with the family, the white life. Okay, mother, father. He grew up with a father, and yet there he was with a murder. Now, my point is, so that side we like to hide. We try to, as best we can, cover over the sinful nature of man. And by the way, it touches every single aspect of our lives. And then ultimately, you're going to see where all of that facade is taken off. So that picture you saw, well, the facade was taken off because what you saw was a killer among them. And they're scratching their heads today wondering how could our family member, shoot a person. And the person wasn't as popular. The media made him popular, but they're scratching their heads now. Well, there's going to come a time when you won't have that facade. You will see people acting as the Pharisees are acting. They're just out there being sinful. And the interesting thing about the Pharisees, by the way, that they, if you were there at the time, remember, most of the people would have saw life as the Pharisees. Most people would have saw life as the Pharisees. Okay? They would have saw life as the Pharisees. And you would have saw, that's a religious person. But yet they were so full of hate. Their fruit was hateful. So when he says the people stood watching and even the leaders kept scoffing. Now, it's kind of interesting because why did the crowd not see this? He saves others. Let him save himself if he's God's Messiah, the chosen one. Well, Jesus spent 3.5 years proving he was the Messiah. The crowd that was there, they had been healed by him. Some of them were fed by him. Some saw the miracles. Then he said, the soldiers also mocked him. They came offering him sour wine and said, if you are the king of the Jews, save yourself. Now, an inscription was above him. This is the king of the Jews. Now, this is what Pilate wrote. The Pharisees tried to have them change that by adding, he said he was the king. Okay. Um, Verse 39. So they're mocking him. Come on, if he's the king of the Jews. So here would be the question too: what more could he have proven to them? He raised Lazarus from the dead openly. The crowds did not see him walk on the water, only his disciples. But they saw him feed 5,000. They saw him feed 4,000 men. They saw multiple healings, multiple miracles of healing. So when he says save yourself, even if he did that, if he saved himself, if he came down from the cross, if he came down and came down right and stood, they still wouldn't believe. That because they refuse to believe. This is how bad sin could be. Now, when they offered him sour wine, he wouldn't take it. Okay? Verse 38 says, then one of the criminals hanging there began to yell insults at him. Aren't you the Messiah? Save us and yourself. But the other answered, rebuking him, don't you even fear God, since you are undergoing the same punishment? Here you are hurling insults, and dude, you're hanging on the cross as well. We are punished justly because we're getting back to what we deserve for the things we did. But this man has done nothing wrong. Then he said to Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom. And he said, I assure you, today you will be with me in paradise. Now that's very interesting right there. That's a very powerful image. You have two guys in the same boat. They were criminals. And as the guy says, what we did, we're being punished justly. It was just. It was meted out. It's just. But notice what he says here. But this man has done nothing wrong. Now, the only reason why I say that is because there are some people who really try to butcher this. I'm not going to go into it. I'm tempted to. But those who believe that you got to be baptized in water, they have a problem with this passage. Because right here, that passage, here, the promise of salvation by Jesus. And this man has not been baptized is always a problem with him. Anyway, but notice here, this man who looks at Jesus and says, we did not do anything wrong. He has done, we have done, we deserve to be here, but this man has done nothing wrong. So the image, so he's recognizing that Jesus is Messiah. And then he turns to him and says, remember me when you come into your kingdom. Why would he say that? Why would he think that? Why would he think to ask Jesus, remember me? There's a couple of things. Remember the Bible, when Jesus asked Peter, he says, who do men say that I am? Who do men say that I, the Son of Man, am? And then Peter said, well, the disciples answered and said, well, some say one of the prophets, one says, Moses, one says Elijah. And those answers that when you would ask people, those answers, the problem with those answers is that Jesus was displaying in his life that he is the Messiah. See, people can display different things in their life, right? So I have a t-shirt on right here and I'm just casual. But if I put a crown, jewels on, then what would you think you're seeing? I'm displaying that I'm some kind of royalty. If I put on some type of authoritative uniform. See, maybe a badge, uniform with a badge. Then you would see, this is what I'm showing you. I'm showing you this so that you can respond to this. So he says, um, um, remember me. And so like I said, why would he ask this? What would make him ask Jesus to remember me? This is a statement of faith. And the response is, I assure you, today you will be with me in paradise. He says, I assure you, today you will be with me in paradise. Today, so right now, today. Now, we won't witness their death. And possibly, and this is what would happen. Oh, I'm sorry, we do know that as the day would linger on, they would come, and probably we would see this later on. They would come and they would break the legs. See, on the cross, they were hanging like this. But then if they broke the legs, they couldn't support themselves. Then they would suffocate. They would suffocate. I assure you, he says, today you will be with me in paradise. So what a promise of eternal life right here, right? What a promise. And then what's sad is that the other man did not. So we kind of see this picture here that there would be some that would be saved. Why? Because they will not be. And notice this. This man, he arrived at pleading with Jesus. He arrived at that without Jesus saying a word to him. In other words, remember, Jesus is on the cross. He's not talking to them. And so one man is kind of like, hey, save us, right? Look, if you're the Messiah, save us. And now go back to this statement in verse 39. He says, aren't you the Messiah? So let's kind of go back and let's analyze this, because this is amazing to me. The one criminal hanging on the cross yells insults at him. Aren't you the Messiah? Save yourself and us. Now, what did he mean by save? Well, get us off this cross. That's probably what he meant. Get us off this cross. Aren't you the Messiah? So both of them had this view of who Jesus was. And they knew this. They saw this. And the one response, like the Pharisees, hey, save us. Hey, how about save us? Now, this man is nailed to a cross. Roman crucifixions were horrible. I don't know why this man was thinking to the point of insulting Jesus, when at the very moment that he's speaking these words, he's facing death. There was no turnaround for him. Then the other one rebuked him. Don't you even fear God? So the other one wasn't talking about save from the standpoint of save me from sin, save me from wrath. Get us off this cross, okay? Break us out of this jail. But then the other one, he's evaluating Jesus. And remember, Jesus is not saying anything to him. Jesus is not saying a word to him. This is a powerful story to me, because it also shows that the hardness of people, the hardness of the hearts. And we see this all the way to the end of time. That the greatest manifestation of the hardness of sin, the rebellion against God, the hatred towards God would be in the form of the beast and his kingdom. Understand that when people receive the mark of the beast, it is not like the goofy Christian movies, Left Behind and The Thief in the Night, all of the tribulation movie, all of the rapture movies, that they always have people struggling. Should I take the mark or should I not take the mark? And a lot of these filmmakers are just, I'm sorry, they're so unscriptural that I'll be nice and leave it at that. The Bible tells us that people would be so hard-hearted, they are going to willingly receive the mark. They're going to willingly worship the beast. And they are going to willingly worship Satan, who gives power to the beast. That's the fruition of sin when it comes to that moment. This is why the judgments are so severe during that period of time. All right, guys, don't forget to like and share this video and subscribe to BP, the Bible Perspective. And as always, if you have a thought or comment, add it to the comment section below. All comments are welcome. And I'll see you in the next video.